welcome back in the drop zone hunting here. And I'm really excited about this one. I've got a friend of mine here tonight with me. He's a real estate agent, land specialist per se, with Trophy Properties and Auction. Scott Athmer is his name. Tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about buying land, selling land, kind of the do's, don'ts, what goes with it, as well as a little bit of what we can do to improve our property and things like that. So, Scotty, if you don't mind, if you give us a little brief background on kind of how you got into this, where you're at with it, and we'll kind of go from there.
Sounds good. First, Jeremy, I appreciate you having me on tonight. Um, I'm really excited about this. This is kind of a second career for me.
Yeah.
I'm towards the end of my law enforcement career. I've served 23 years in law enforcement, and as you well know, um, been in the hunting industry for a long time.
Long time.
I've filmed hunts with several different TV shows since about 2001. So this has just been a passion of mine and something that I've known I wanted to do. And as I got closer to the end of my career there, I went and got my license and kind of started to try and get my feet wet, try and build a little bit of a clientele. And it's absolutely exploded for me. So it's been a lot of fun. I love setting up farms. I love talking deer, turkeys, fishing, all of it. And so it's just kind of a natural fit for me.
Let me ask you this, getting into this, following up after, a prior career, has there been any kind of like unique challenges, diving into this, or was it kind of natural to you because you kind of come from a hunting world all your life type of thing?
As far as doing the job, being able to walk property, look at property, kind of have an idea of what we could do to improve it per se, that I've been doing for a long, long time. So
Okay.
that part kind of comes natural. What's become challenging for me is it's really at times become two full-time jobs, and I didn't anticipate that. I didn't anticipate it kind of taking off for me as quickly as it has.
Yeah.
So time management is trying to juggle two careers right now, basically, and still get family time.
Sure.
Spend time with the wife and kids. Sometimes that can be difficult.
Sure. So let's just kind of dive into this a little bit because I do got quite a few different things I want to go over with you. But as we sit right now, like current trends in like recreational land market, particularly with you guys at Trophy Properties and Auction, what are some things that you're seeing right now compared to, when you started?
So I got my license in 18, and prior to that, right when I first got my license, the market was actually pretty slow. Even though rates were down, it seemed like there was quite a few people selling, not a lot of people buying. And then COVID hit, and as we all know, everybody wanted to get out. Everybody wanted to. But I think honestly, people had time to sit around and look for something to do, something to buy, and the real estate market exploded, both homes and land.
Yeah,
and money was cheap at that time. Interest rates were down, and it flipped, and things went crazy for in 2020, 2021. It was absolutely insane. And
their busy lives kind of slowed down to where they can start looking at
right.
other things they want to do,
Right. And I think it gave the whole country a sense of kind of what was important. I know for us, for my family, we were running around playing softball. My daughter played softball. My son shoots trap all over the Midwest and all over the country, really. And when all of that kind of shut down, it really made us recenter our focus on, hey, maybe we shouldn't run around so much. Maybe we should go spend time at the farm. And I think it did that as a whole
to a lot of people.
Right. And, but the land values and the inventory just fell through the floor. I mean, the values skyrocketed and the inventory fell through the floor. And it was that way going strong for probably almost 2 years.
Yeah.
And now that the rates have come up, it's definitely plateaued. But the market is still extremely strong. If you have something If we price it accurately, we do comparative analysis, and as long as you price something accurately, it's going to sell relatively quickly,
Really?
even in this market.
So let's get into that. Let's kind of start with um, the buyer, and then we'll work into a seller. But as a buyer, what are first off, let's do this. As a buyer, what if I'm a first time buyer into land, first things first, what is the biggest difference between me as a buyer going out to try to buy a piece of recreational ground versus me saying, hey, I want to buy a new house, or I want to move and I want to live here now. I got to go to the bank and try to, what is the big difference, for somebody who's looking to maybe buy a ground, who's never been in this world before, for land versus home real estate?
Sure. Well, I look at the two very differently, so let's talk about homes first. Most people buy homes; they only own one home, and they're going to live in that home. So, in my opinion, that's not disposable income.
Okay.
So I like to sit down with folks, and on both sides of the coin, I do this, but I like to sit down with folks and make sure that the last thing I ever want to do is make somebody house poor or land poor. If all you can do, if you're getting up and going to work every single day just to pay for your house, that's no way to live. So the first thing that we have to do is set a realistic budget. I'm not the kind of guy that's going to blow your email box up with 100 properties that you can't afford or 100 houses that you can't afford. Let's sit down. I'm not in the business of wasting each other's time.
Sure.
Let's find out what you want and what you can afford and what you're willing to pay. And then we'll narrow that search so that hopefully in 2, 3, 4 properties or 2 or 3, 4 houses, we find something that's going to work for you. On the recreational side, on the land side, for most buyers, it is disposable income, in my opinion.
Okay.
If you're going out and you're definitely making an investment there, but you have to be able to afford that investment. So the best thing that I can tell you in this market, it is a fast-paced market. Like I said, when things are priced accurately, they don't sit. So the first thing that I tell everybody is have a conversation with your family so you know what your budget is, where you're comfortable. Sit down with your lender and find out where you're comfortable, and then have a conversation about pre-approval. What are your limits? And then after you've done all that, what I tell people is be ready to make the decision. Then you and I are going to sit down and we're going to figure out what you like to do, what you're looking for in your piece of real estate. If you're a fisherman, or what are your deal breakers? If you're a fisherman and you want a pond, if you're a deer hunter and you want a deer hunting farm, you want a combo farm, or you a waterfowl guy, are you horseback rider, ATVs? What is it you're looking to purchase? The second thing we're going to talk about is location. Where do you want this? What I tell people a lot of times is if you can stay within 1 hour of your home, you're going to use it way more often than you will if you get beyond that. If you get beyond that, we need to start talking about the possibility of having a place to stay there, a cabin site or a cabin or a house on the property. And then we're going to narrow that scope just like we did in a house. And I'm going to figure out what it is exactly that you're looking for. And nowadays, it used to be when you hired a real estate agent prior to the internet and prior to common person who didn't have a license, didn't have access to all the properties that are listed. And that's not the case anymore. So in the market being as fast paced as it is, we're going to search together. I'm going to give you the sites that I search: land.com, LandWatch, Farm and Home, Horse Properties, depending on what you're looking for. And we're going to search every day together at different times. And you're going to see stuff before I will, and I'm going to see stuff before you will. And we're going to stay in constant communication. And when we see something that you're like, hey, I want to see this, then it's time that I go to work for you. And we'll go out, we'll take a look at it. I'll give you my 2 cents. And if it's the right one, I tell everybody, picking a piece of ground is like picking a spouse. When you get there and it's the right one, you're gonna know. You're gonna know.
That makes sense. I mean, I can see that, especially in the in the housing world. You would shop around and you're like, this is the one. Let me ask you this: is as far as if if people are asking you, is it are the bank where are banks at with lending on land versus homes? Is it harder to get a loan on land than it is a house? Because like in my mind, I'm thinking that piece of dirt's always going to be worth a piece of dirt and whatever that market is for that.
Correct.
And then I look at it like I almost think, and I don't know if it's, and you explain this to me more. I'm like, I almost think, man, you would think that a bank would be like, I'll give him money for that land because I know I can get something out of that easier than that house is going to depreciate, but yada, yada with homes. Is that the case or not?
I wouldn't say that it's more difficult. Typically, you have less programs for zero down. Like I know there's a lot of first time home buyer programs and different programs with the different lenders on homes where you can go zero down. We don't typically see as much of that. They are out there. But what a lot of people misunderstand is with land lending, typically you got to have 20 to 30% down.
Okay, that's what I was wanting to see if you could tell me.
That doesn't necessarily have to be cash in the bank. So if you have that amount of money in equity in your home, a lot of land lenders will accept that equity in your home as your down payment, if that makes sense. Or if you have some sort of collateral or you own another piece of ground, you can use that as your down payment oftentimes. But the biggest thing that I will tell people is if you're interested in land and taking out a loan for land, go talk to somebody who does land. It's a very different animal. There are very different aspects that make land more valuable or less valuable. And go sit down with somebody who understands that, and as opposed to somebody who does nothing but traditional home lending, because they're going to be looking at it from a traditional home standpoint. And a lot of times you can get a lot better deal and a lot better program if you go to a bank, and several of your larger banks will have a land division. And then obviously there's several credit unions out there as well that specialize in it.
And that's what I was going to ask. Is it something that me as a consumer, I need to do my own homework on, or is there places that you want to mention that like, hey, these people, this place works well with people, or is it something I should probably just kind of go out and research and do on my own?
So 99% of the folks that I have as buyers typically have somebody they've worked with in the past, or somebody they're comfortable with. We're not, as the company, affiliated with any lenders, but I have several lenders that I have worked with through the years that understand land and are very good at what they do. And if we get to that point, and it's, oftentimes I'll have people ask, hey, you got anybody? And I'll shoot them a couple of names, and they're rate shopping, which is, there's absolutely no problem with that.
Gotcha.
Whoever can get you the best rate or the best deal, that's who you go with.
Okay. What do you think about, I've sat on a piece of ground, or, I've started myself out with a 20-acre piece, a 40-acre piece, and either, let's say, I've outgrown it, or it's not, or I'm a different place in life now, and I've decided I want to do something different. And I'm going to come to Scott and say, Scott, I'm thinking about selling this 40-acre piece of land I got. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, what are some things as a seller that I'm going to need to do or should do possibly to help bring that value up or help make that more of an enticing piece to, people looking? Mm-hmm. What are some insights for guys that are thinking about selling?
Well, first and foremost, what I'll tell you is hire somebody to sell that for you that understands land. If it's not me, if it's not Trophy Properties and Auction, there's several other companies out there that specialize in land. Hire an agent that does land, because it is very, very different. And the marketing strategies are very different. We have national marketing strategies,
Sure.
whereas a lot of your local agents who sell homes and stuff, they don't have the national reach. And I'll be honest, several of my buyers over the years have come from out of state. So that's the first thing: is choose wisely, choose somebody who understands ground. The second thing is listen to your agent. So
And that can be hard to do sometimes because the person's
absolutely.
thinking, no, you listen to me. This is my
Right,
piece of ground,
right,
you know?
right. And there's little nuances like mowing. Mowing is huge. It is absolutely huge. Mowing and weeding. If you have a building uh, on your property, or a cabin or something like that, you want curb appeal. Just like selling a house, you want curb appeal when you pull up to that farm. Go, even if it's just a gate and it's overgrown CRP grass, and that's where you've parked for 20 years when you left to go hunting. You know what? Mow out a little trail, mow out an area to park. People are inherently lazy. So we want to make this as easy for somebody to come and be impressed as we possibly can. And so mowing and just cleaning up around your property is probably the number one thing I would say. If you're selling a recreational farm, a deer hunting farm, or if you currently own one and you are contemplating flipping it in a year or two, keep a dedicated trail camera history.
I've noticed that even
There
just
is
looking at places
there
myself.
is nothing that sells a farm better than a deer history. If guys know what kind of animals came off of that property, and they know, that's what they can expect to see moving forward, then that's it's a lot easier to pull the trigger on something like that as a buyer than seeing a bunch of deer trails and a few sapling rubs, and there's a lot of deer, but what caliber of bucks are there? So keep that trail camera history, keep those harvest photos. If you think you're potentially going to be selling that piece of ground at some point, keep that in a file folder somewhere. And typically, what I like is to have within the last 3 years. It doesn't do me a whole lot of good for you to start sending me trail camera pictures from 2019, because those deer are either dead by old age at that point, or
Right.
somebody's killed them. But especially the last 2 years, maybe 3 years, those animals could still be alive. Those animals could still be on that farm. So that's what I like to include in my listings, and then look for who's going to who's going to give you the best marketing. Um, get on their websites. Get on my website. I invite you to go to my website with Trophy Properties and click on my listings. As you get what you pay for. Put it that way.
Yeah.
I'm willing to put my listings and my photos. I have professional photographers take all of my photos, and so it's make sure you buy somebody that understands how to sell what you're selling.
I want to circle back because my mind races when we do this stuff. I'm like, man, I was thinking, so let me ask you this, I want to kind of go back to the buyer. I have a lot of questions about, buying and
Sure.
myself and stuff. And I think a lot of people do. I think about different things, myself and buying a piece of land, and maybe you can throw some insight on this as far as, you're talking about the seller and stuff like that, and even with a house, I always, wonder as a buyer, why are they selling it?
Mm-hmm.
What's the reason for selling it? So then as a buyer, and I'm looking at a piece that's for sale, I kind of sometimes think, okay, why is this Bill selling his piece of ground? And I wonder, as far as a buyer trying to do their homework on how do they go about maybe like figuring out what kind of neighbors they have, and and how do the neighbors hunt if they do hunt? Like, because if somebody's buying this, is, let's say, I should more iterate on if you're really looking for a hunting piece of ground versus recreational, because some of that may not matter to a certain individual. But if you're buying a piece for hunting, let's say whitetail deer hunting and stuff, how do I set myself up knowing that my neighbor's on two sides, or my neighbors are this guy, these people shoot everything that walks, and I'm going to try to manage, or these guys are great managers, this neighbor is tough to get along with. What are some insights on this?
That's the age old question. So, when I first started, and the market wasn't as fast paced as it was, I had several buyers I mean, I encourage you, look these guys up, talk to them. If they live there, um, go have a conversation with them. If they wanted to buy that farm, they'd have bought it. So that's the number one thing that you can do, is if you have the time to go knock on a door, make a phone call, and judge the neighbor that way. The other part of that is if the market won't allow that because it's too fast paced, and you set foot on it and you're like, yep, this is the one, then I encourage people every time I sell a piece of ground to go meet their neighbors. And nothing beats a face to face, find out where this guy lives, go call him up. Hey, can we go have coffee? Try and get on the same page, because eventually one of you is going to shoot a deer that ends up on the wrong side of the fence.
Sure.
And when you have that conversation, when you meet that person, don't immediately delve into how do you hunt? Are you shooting 3-year-olds? Are you shooting, 4-year-old 120-inch deer? Let that come out as it may. I know that's important to a lot of guys, but at the end of the day, if my neighbor comes to introduce himself and right away he starts telling me about what I should be shooting on my own farm, you're going to come across wrong. You're shooting yourself in the foot there. So create a friendship, create a relationship, and then as time goes on, that stuff will, it'll work itself out. But the worst thing you can do is go throw purple paint up on every fourth tree on your line, and before you meet anybody,
you start off fisticuffs right out the
right,
gate swinging.
right. All of a sudden, the guy comes to his farm. He hasn't been there in 3 months, and he comes to do a little mowing, and he knows that track sold, and he goes out into his field, and what's he see on his fence line is nothing but purple paint as far as he can see. What kind of impression have you just made on your neighbor?
Sure.
I always tell people the same thing. If you're going to have a survey done, call your neighbors and tell them. Call them and tell them, say, hey, I'm having this done. It's only to protect my own investment. I'm not trying to, set boundaries, and nobody can, so just communication. Communication is the key. And 99.9% of the time you can get along well with your neighbors.
No, and I think that's a valid point, Scott, because when you talk about, the surveys and stuff, because let's face it, a lot of times when we're looking at aerial photos and real estate agents and even the owner before, the line runs, right down through here, and it cuts across the creek over there, and that big oak on the end, that's cottonwood. That's always been that marker. That's just, that was the agreement between, his great grandpa or the last person he bought it from. That was,
Sure.
So I think that's kind of an important point that I didn't even think about as far as surveying goes, because one, you may be throwing a deer stand up, in a spot, and you're like, well, no, when I bought it, the red line looked from up that it's here. And it's like, well, no, it's not. So I think that's really important key is, do you suggest on any piece of ground you should have it surveyed, or how do you feel about that?
I really don't. I walked a piece today, and the common boundaries, if you will, are pretty plain to see. There's an old fence line in the timber that is obviously what they've used as the boundary. And initially, if that piece sells as one piece, then it's up to the buyer at that point. If they want to survey it, they don't have to. They don't have to for the sale. It will sell as the acreage that's registered with the county, the taxable acreage. But if you buy that piece and then you want to have it surveyed, so that some people want to do it just so they know. Some people want to do it just so they know where their lines are at. I highly suggest that you get a hold of your neighbor first and start a conversation with them, start a relationship with them, and say, hey, I'm going to have this surveyed, and it has nothing to do with trying to keep you on the other side of the fence or anything like that. I spent a lot of money. This is an investment for me. I want to know exactly what my acreage is. And that's going to go a long ways to maintain that relationship, as opposed to you buy a piece of ground and the neighbors hear that it's sold. A month later, they're out doing something on their property and they see a land surveying crew, and you know how the human brain works. All of a sudden, oh boy, I wonder who this guy is.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden he's putting up markers to keep everybody out. And now he thinks and none of that may be true.
Right.
But that's immediately where every hunter that I've ever met goes when the neighboring property starts getting surveyed.
Do you think that as far as within the buying process, and I guess we could throw selling in here too, older farms that may have been in a family a while, grandpa passes away, or dad passes away, kids have moved on, ain't around, they really ain't interested in keeping a piece.
Sure.
Trees have been on this thing, it's been in the family for X amount of years, a lot of mature trees on this thing. Do I, as a buyer, when I'm looking for a farm, or and I think I want to kind of talk about this in both directions for people that are selling too. If I'm buying a piece that's got mature trees on it, you're going to tell me, hey, we've got some trees on here that you could take off for some income, as well as if I'm coming to you to sell it. Do you try and say, hey, now you realize if you pull trees off of this before you sell it, property value is going to go, is that going to make the ground go down because I took trees off versus I didn't? So how do you play that game?
At the end of the day, I would suggest, as a seller, if you have mature trees, have a timber value assessment done. And we actually have a PhD forester on staff with Trophy Properties and Auction.
I'll be darned.
If that's something you're interested in, let me know. I can get a hold of Eric and we can set it up. And he will actually come through and value your timber in board feet for you, so you know what you have. And then that's really your decision. If you want to have it timbered, it's going to decrease the value significantly of the property. Two things happen when you timber property. One of the first questions most buyers ask me is, has this been logged? The second thing is, just by the nature of cutting timber, it's a very nasty job. There's going to be tops laying everywhere, big ruts. It looks pretty rough a lot of times. Even doing a select cut, it looks pretty rough for a year, sometimes 2 or 3 years before those tops rot down, so it's definitely going to decrease the value of the property. Now, depending on what you're taking off, is that decrease worth what you're going to get in having it timbered? That's a decision that you're going to have to make as the seller. It's your property. I'm not here to make that decision. As a buyer, if you're wanting cheaper ground, look for something that's been logged. Something that doesn't have necessarily that timber value. If you're going to be in it for the long term, if this is your investment, you're going to buy that 40 or that 60 and you plan on keeping that forever, and that's for you and your family to enjoy and to hunt. And in 10 years, 12 years, 15 maybe, you'll never know it was timbered. But if your intention is to flip, to buy a 20, hopefully in 2 or 3 years turn that into a 40, hopefully turn that into a 60, and on down the road, I would caution you against buying log timber because it's still going to look logged when you're trying to flip it in 2 or 3 years.
So curb appeal, then, would you say that appeal for the seller is to try to leave it as virgin as you can? If you're selling it, if you're not in, if it's a piece of ground that you're not really interested in, like messing with all that, as a buyer, I feel like I would want something that if I need to recourse some of that, payment,
Certainly.
I know that, okay, and I'm trying to sell this to my wife and
Right.
honey, listen, we buy this piece there's X amount of worth of logs on it.
Sure.
We're going to get that back. I think for the buyer, it's more appealing if they know that they have that option when they buy
Absolutely.
it. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's almost like money in a savings account. Because if you buy, a 40 or a 60 or whatever size tract that has $50,000 in timber that would come back to the landowner on a timber contract, and something happens in your life and you need 20 grand, you can call X number of loggers and they'll sign a contract with you and write you a check pretty much that day for that amount of money. So it's like having money in the bank almost. I'm not a logger. I don't care to cut timber personally. However, I do think it's necessary in some instances for the health of the timber. It's good to go in and do a select cut to open that canopy up a little bit, allow some sunlight to hit that ground, and allow some of those less mature trees the opportunity to mature out. And and again, that's what my suggestion. Again, if you have a piece and you're considering having it timbered, have somebody like Eric or a forester who's not affiliated with a particular uh, um, timber company walk that woods and tell you what's best for the timber before you ever call a logger. Because a logger's going to, they're great guys. Most of the guys that I work with are great dudes. But at the end of the day, they're there to make,
Sure.
they're there to make money.
They're there to make money.
cut as much board feet that they can get paid for as they can. And so I'm more of a conservationist, and I would rather have a forester tell me, hey, we're going to take all the trees over 18 or whatever the case may be for this particular woods, or we're only going to take this species and not that species. So we have that ability. Give me a call. I'd love to set you up with Eric, and he'd be more than happy to do that for you.
Let me ask you this. I want to talk acreage a little bit, and you can comment on this how you want, but I do got some questions. Like, if you're buying land, and I know it's you got to do your as far as what do you want and what are you looking for, but is there that ideal acre number that if you're buying this for hunting, I like to do hunting because that's what we're on. We're a hunting show. Is there an ideal acre number that a person? I know you probably like, this is not a good question, but
no, that's fine.
Is there like an acreage that it's like, if you really want to utilize this and you want it to work right for you, is there a number?
So, well, it depends on what you want. Okay. If your idea is you want to kill the biggest, baddest bucks you can, you cannot afford to own enough acreage to do that.
Right.
I don't have to sit here and tell you what the home range of a white-tailed deer is.
Sure.
The only way you're going to do that, and I shouldn't say you can't, there's probably 2% of the population that can afford to own that much. So I'll tell you, it's funny you say that because I know you know Kyle Weeder.
Sure.
And Kyle and I have been friends. We've filmed together since 2001. And we've always had the motto. We've done some crazy stuff trying to kill big deer, but we've always had the motto, I'll take the right 40 over the wrong 400 any day of the week. And what I mean by that is I don't care if it's 10. I don't care if it's 100. If it accomplishes your goal, if it is the right 10, then it's 10. That the answer to that question is 10 acres. If it is, if it's 100 acres, but there hasn't been a deer over 130 inches set foot on that 100 acres in the last 5 years, you have to do so much work to create an environment to get big bucks to live there that it's not going to be worth it. Even if it's cheap, it's not going to be worth it. By the time you put all of that into it and alter the landscape to create bedding, to create feeding, to create security, to create everything it takes to hold older age class bucks, it's not going to be worth it. So, again, kind of going back to the first conversations that I have with folks is trying to narrow down and almost get a laser focus on what they want. What is it? What is your vision for the money you're investing in this recreational opportunity? Is it to kill 4-year-old deer or better? Or is it to have a place where you can sit with your kids and enjoy an evening hunt on a bean field and see 6, 8, 10, maybe 15 deer? And that's what's important to you. It doesn't matter what size they are. So whatever that is for you, we're going to go out and try and find it. So I know it's kind of a political answer, and I don't mean to be that way, but it's different for everybody. But I've hunted some 5-acre tracts of timber that were absolutely dynamite, and I've hunted some 500-acre tracts of woods that I don't think there's ever to this day been a full-sized animal set foot on that farm. But
no, and I think you bring up. I think you're right on with that. I think you bring up a good point there, because I think one thing is, that is, I like that statement. That the right 40, in the right area, I'll take that over. I think that's a good statement, because I think also looking, doing your homework on where's this 40 or this 20 what's around this 20 and 40, and you start blowing up your property, and looking at big funnels and different things coming in. And it's like, I mean, it's 10 acres, but they got to come through. They're going to come through here because there's nowhere else for them to go for cover. I mean, this might be a great 10 to have to start with, and you may never want to get rid of it. Right. And you only hunt it during the rut, because that they're going to be, when they're moving, they are going to come through this. So that's a good point. I mean, I think that to look at it like, don't always sell yourself on the acreage rather than
certainly
on how it lays, maybe. As far as, let me ask you this, as far as Illinois is mostly where you're spending your time. Mm-hmm. Okay. Middle of the state per se as a norm.
I go, oh man, I've sold stuff as far north as Peoria and right across the river from Kentucky. So I mean, I'm licensed anywhere in the state of Illinois. We don't, with Trophy Properties, we don't have territories. For the right customer, the right deal, we'll reach out there and get it wherever it's at.
This may be another one of those political questions, but different counties, years ago, the Pike County era was here, and I don't know. I mean, I might get beat up by some of the Pike County guys. I think that, I'm not saying that there's still not great deer up there. There is. I mean, it's obvious. But there's a lot of counties that are these little secret, private, quiet, nobody likes to talk about areas. And in the world that you're in, and I come to you and say, Scott, man, I don't care if I drive 2 hours. I don't care if I have to drive an hour and a half. I mean, I want to kill a good deer. And where do I need to be, Scott?
You're trying to get me shot. That's what you're trying to do.
I'm just digging. I'm digging with a land specialist is what I'm doing.
So,
and we don't have to lay out, all together, but I mean, but if you look at it, let's just be real. Let's be real. From where we're at here in Madison County, I myself hunt in Calhoun, still good. I would say it's good. I don't know that it's as good now as it was 20 years ago.
I would agree with that.
I think they got hit pretty hard a few years back, and I still think that they're trying to recover from it. We still got good deer up there, but I don't think it's what it was when I initially showed up there. It's reality.
Yeah.
I think there's other areas that are good. I think counties, I mean, I've hunted in a lot of different, I think, counties, Marion County, Fayette County, Clinton. I mean, I think,
Sure.
I mean, I know that I think there's some that are better than others. Will you agree with that?
Absolutely, 100%. And so here's kind of my take on that. I agree with you. I hunted Calhoun '01 to probably 2010, Northern Calhoun, the south end of Pike, and during part of that time we owned our farm in Jefferson County, Illinois, at the time, and I was seeing better deer up north than I was on my own farm, and nowadays I think two things have happened. EHD devastated our deer herd. It absolutely devastated it.
I agree.
'08 to 2010, it just devastated our area, my area in Jefferson County. It was the numbers fell out. It was unbelievable. So I think that had a huge part in it back then. The other thing is you have a lot more people now that are setting up farms, whether it be 40-acre farms or 400-acre farms, specifically for whitetail deer. You have people farming for whitetail deer in every county around, whether it be Randolph, they're killing some giants. Washington County, if you look around, whether you see it on Facebook, a lot of guys don't get their deer scored anymore because they don't want their counties in the record book. I haven't had a deer scored since 2003. But they're killing big deer. I mean, oh man, I can't think of his name now. Zen's his first name. The young man that killed that giant buck in Fayette County 2 years ago.
The one that, yeah, I know which deer you're talking
yeah,
about.
he went way over 200 inches.
Yes, yes.
So and I think that's a result of people farming for deer all over. And when I say that, there's a lot more folks now letting 2-year-olds walk, letting 3-year-olds. There's a lot more folks letting 3-year-old 135, 140-inch deer walk than there was 10 years ago. And so you have a lot more deer in Illinois getting to that fully mature age class than you maybe did 10 years ago. So I think it's a combination of things, but I think that probably within, it's weird for us. And I've said for a long time, if you live in our area, the Metro East, you have to drive an hour to get into really good deer hunting. It doesn't matter if you go north, south, or east in Illinois. The deer hunting is exponentially better, roughly an hour's drive from where we live.
100%.
So I think if you're a hills guy, if you like a lot of terrain, Calhoun, Macoupin, Jersey, Green, they're killing big deer up there. If you're more of a flatland kind of guy and you like big timber, Bond, Fayette, that's kind of more of that MO. If you're more of a river bottoms guy, something like that, Randolph, some of those southern counties. But it's just kind of kind of where you want to be. But I think they're killing big deer all over the place in this state now.
I agree. And I think, you say curb appeal, and I agree with curb appeal. And I've always been a sucker for, I tell all my buddies and stuff, it's to me personally, in my opinion, Pike and Calhoun and Jersey and those counties up in there, it's like the closest thing that I can feel like I can be out west is
Sure.
is in some of them areas with the rocky cliffs and hills, and I just love that hill hunting. Now my body hates it. I can't be every deer you kill it finds the nastiest roughest ravine and hole to go down into and die, and it takes 3 men and 2 neighbors to get it up out of there. But it's I don't know, I love the hill country. Certainly. I just do. I don't, I guess maybe it's because I've hunted it so long, I've kind of got used to hunting it. But but I hear guys talking in other areas that they got land, and I go hunt with them, and and I see things that are going on there, and it's like, my gosh, it's it's a learning curve, on how to hunt different things. And I always said, like you said, that perfect 40. I mean, I've hunted some 40s that hunt like they're 80 acres with hills and hollers and stuff in them. It's like there's deer can come through this on one side, and you may never see them. You may never see them just because of the way the land lays.
Right.
And I think that appealed to me a lot. Was making it feel like you're hunting a bigger piece than what you might be.
Sure. Sure.
But I agree with you on the fact that you're right when you say that. Do you think there's more people in the woods, or do you think that?
Undoubtedly.
So you think there's more people in the woods, but you think
Undoubtedly.
there's more people more conscious of whitetail management than what there was?
I think so.
I do too.
I think that, and starting with the first part of that, crossbows has put more people in the woods.
Sure.
I mean, plain and simple. Whether you like them or hate them, I'm not here to have that debate.
Right.
That's not what I'm here for. But at the end of the day, one thing that is undisputable is there are people hunting with crossbows that would not be hunting archery season if they weren't legal. So that to that end, you have more hunters, and I think that absolutely, just in conversation with people, talking to people, meeting people, I meet more people now that are willing to pass deer than I did even 6-7 years ago when I started doing this. And far more people than I did 20 years ago when I started filming. And I can't tell you 20 years ago when I started filming, and we'd pass up a 140-inch deer that was only 3 years old, and I'd show that video to some of my buddies or whatever on my phone or whatever the case may be. 99 times out of 100, every one of them was like, dude, you're an idiot. Why are you not shooting that deer? And nowadays, it's more of the norm for sure. So I think those two things. And again, people are buying farms and setting farms up specifically to allow deer to get to a better age class. And I think that's a big part of it.
And I think, love them or hate them, there's people have different outlooks on, if you want to call them TV hunters and that. I think that a lot of them have opened the eyes to, people that watch that kind of stuff on what land management does to your deer herd. Whether you get mad that they got these big pieces of ground, and sure, some of them might have, but they're also opening your eyes to letting those deer go. And then,
sure,
like we can back all the way back up to having those conversations with a neighbor. How you present things is key to everything. He may have been one that shot everything, but all of a sudden he's like, man, this guy's trying to let these things get big. I think I might start doing it too. And now all of a sudden you're creating this,
right.
Now you're 40 is now you've got 80 acres that is getting managed, and it helps everybody,
Right.
So I think approach and conversations is key with it. I think that in the world today, we lack conversation. And I think
Absolutely.
conversation is key on anything. Just having a conversation with somebody can help so much.
Yeah. And you're talking about neighbors, and so we've owned our farm since 2006, and it's a 50-acre tract, and it is part of some really big woods where we're at. And I honestly don't know how it happened over the years. Just talking to neighbors, and there's a track around us that doesn't get hunted, and then there's a family that owns a fairly large tract. Family, they're farmers, great folks. But just in getting to know them over the years, and we started, when we first bought it, trail cameras were 35 millimeter, and you had to go over to the Walgreens, and you're waiting for 1 hour photo, and you're, and now as soon as that deer walks by your camera, you got the picture. But, it's amazing. and I would love to have a blueprint for how it came to be, because like I said, I really don't know. But in our area, um, where our farm's located, I would say I'd have to count it up, but there's between 800 and 1,200 acres of ground where we're all friends. We all share pictures. We all, if somebody shoots a deer, you know, everybody's on the phone. If it crosses the line, hey, are you hunting? You know, you do mine? Nobody has a problem with allowing you to come get your animal, or you know, they'll help you, and they're not helping you to make sure you're not stealing their tree stands. They're generally being a good neighbor and wanting to help you find the animal. So, um, you know, it goes back to, like you said, I don't know how that happened. We didn't set out for that to be the case. When we bought the farm, the one right next to us, they were, if it's brown, it's down. We had tremendous deer numbers in '05. Well, we bought in '06. So in '06, '07, '08, tremendous deer numbers. And just on the farm next to us, one shotgun season, they took 13 animals.
Wow.
And so, and they were all legal. I mean, they weren't doing anything illegal. They were just doing a lot more killing than than we wanted them to be doing.
Right.
But you know, at the end of the day, you know, pretty much all the same people. You know, there was a lot of guys from out of state that came in and hung with this guy, and over time, that's gone by the wayside. And he has, what I would say, matured in his hunting, where it's not about killing anymore. It's not about, you know, he goes out and shoots a doe or two for his meat deer, and then you know, he's letting 2 and 3 year olds walk for the most part. So
And it helps everybody.
yeah, and it's become a lot of fun now during the trail camera season. Really, once the bucks really start filling out, you know, everybody's sending pictures back and forth. Hey, what do you think? How old do you think this deer is? How old do you think that deer is? And for the most part, you know, our unwritten rule, if you will, is, you know, kids are allowed to shoot whatever they want. But if once you've killed 2 or 3 bucks, you know, the goal is kind of to try and wait for that older age class deer. And I'm not saying that a 3-year-old's off the table at that point, you know, but you know, it's really helped, and I can tell you, it has the age class of our deer herd, of our buck herd, has increased exponentially over the last 4 or 5 years, just kind of unintentionally, just by talking to our neighbors and you know,
That's awesome.
so
Let me ask you this. You know, as we sit here and it's 2024, you know, I think back to, you know, land out in Marion County when I was a kid hunting that way, and ground going for 600-700 an acre. As time evolves, we get to $1,000 an acre, and then it just keeps going. Where are we at with the new norm? You know, like what, you know, the market can go up and down as it wants, you know, and it's going to. It doesn't matter. It's just going to. It's inevitable. It's just going to be a roller coaster. That's just life, you know. Some years may go longer than others, but it's always going to fluctuate.
right.
But if we have to call the new norm of, you know, what I would say hunting ground, as far as this piece of ground is going to be strictly for hunting. It may not be the most prettiest, you know, piece to build a park in, but it's hunting ground. Where are we at with the new norm, and where do you see it's laying for a while, as far as, you know, ground? And, you know, like, we don't have to pull out, you know, all the counties, but if we start looking at different counties around where are we at with the new norm, and where do you think we're going to be?
You mean price wise?
Yeah.
So,
acreage wise.
yeah. So a price per acre, I would say. And that's a difficult question, just because it depends on what it is. It depends on if there's tillable versus timber, if there's government program income, you know, if it floods, if it doesn't flood, what the access is. There's a lot of factors that go into
fair.
that question.
That's fair.
But as a general statement, roughly, again, going back to what I said earlier, an hour from the city. Okay. So we're roughly 20, 25 minutes from St. Louis here.
Right.
If you go another hour east of here or south or north, I would say you're in the $4,000 to $5,000 an acre range. If it is really, really good, if it has a really strong deer history, um, you're maybe going over $5,000 an acre. If you're closer to the city, Madison County, Illinois, you're probably going over $5,000 an acre. Where do I see that going? I'm 47. I could probably, my earliest memories are probably when I was 10, 12, and I can remember my grandfather saying there is no way that this ground price can keep going up. There's no way people can pay $1,200 an acre for farm ground and be able to farm it. And, they're paying 12, 15, 17, $18,000 an acre now for the same farm ground. I don't know where it's going. You got, as you said, the market fluctuates, but we have more people getting into it than ever before with crossbows and all of that. Love or hate the hunting industry, it has brought the TV industry part of it has brought a lot more people to the table. It's introduced it to more folks than would not have seen it if it hadn't been for social media or things like YouTube or all of that. So, those are all potential buyers down the road. And as you well know, they're not making any more dirt. So, as it's simple supply and demand. I don't know the answer to that question.
I don't either. I just keep thinking, do you ever hit that spot where it's like, there's no way it can get to, but like you said, your grandfather said that about $1,200 an acre for farm ground. I just, I keep thinking that just, I don't know how you can do, how it can happen. I mean, it's just, it's hard. It's a hard thing to wrap your brain around.
Sure.
This,
and
land.
It's all relative, right? So when he said that about farm ground, a man could make a good living for his family at $40,000 a year.
Sure.
You're barely above poverty level now, probably at $40,000 a year. So it's all relative, right? It's kind of the way that I look at it. You'd have to really, really get into it and look at the percentages, the median income then versus the land price, and median income now versus land price, to really know if we're actually paying more for ground now. Just because the numbers look bigger, is it that much more percentage of a family's income that they're spending on? I think in tillable ground, absolutely it is. But when you start talking about, in the 70s, you were buying timber ground for $500 an acre, stuff like that. Now let's say it's 5,000, but if you're making that much more money,
right?
Do you see what I'm?
Sure. It's in that world, it's the same as what it is in this world. It just looks like a bigger number.
It's just a bigger number.
Yeah.
Now I think you get into tillable ground, and
that's a whole nother animal.
That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah. That's one that I wouldn't know nothing about at all. I kind of want to steer into a direction of, I bought a piece of ground. Okay. You talked a little bit about it at the beginning. What are some things in this world that, in what you're doing with, with trophy properties and auction here, as far as key things for me as a guy who just bought a piece of ground, to, if it ain't quite maybe what I want it to be, what are some things that I can do to bring that,
Sure.
for the deer and stuff.
Sure.
Let's kind of talk a little bit about, land management and different things I can do with with my land and stuff like that, as far as making it
Absolutely.
better for me as a deer hunter.
And I that's one of the reasons that I got into doing this. One of the things that I love to do with it is so as I stated earlier, I'm finishing up my career in law enforcement, and my retirement is fine. So at the end of the day, I don't do this to keep my lights on. So I'm not out here trying to make deals. I'm trying to make friends. I'm
Sure.
trying to if I'm trying to build relationships. So if we go out and buy a farm together, um, my favorite part of that transaction is staying in touch with you, knowing what you're doing, helping you out with some ideas, putting you in touch with people like our forester. We have fishing biologists. I had a client locally that I sold a large farm to. It had an 8-acre lake on it, and he had Jason Knibe come out, our fisheries expert. Went through it. They ended up setting up an entire plan. They're feeding shiners. Jason went out there and put in aerators and really turned that lake around to make it as healthy as it possibly could be. And I stay in touch with that guy. And that's the fun part of this for me, is helping you get set up and helping set it up for you to be successful. And so the number one thing that I think is overlooked in whitetail management, food plots are sexy, man.
Sure.
Everybody wants to put in food. And that is the most over marketed deal in the Midwest. I mean, there is more food for these whitetails that the farmers plant than you could ever plant in a food plot. And I'm just as guilty. I plant them every year. But the number one thing that I think is overlooked in whitetail management is bedding, secure cover and bedding, and entrance and exit routes, setting up screens so that you can get in and out and hunt those deer without those deer knowing they're being hunted. I've read all kinds of articles, and I think Don Higgins is the one that wrote it, or at least when I read it, but it really stuck with me that a mature whitetail buck spends roughly 95% of his time during daylight hours, during hunting hours, on his belly outside of the rut. So throw the rut out the window. We all know they're out cruising, doing their thing. So let's say the first 3.5 weeks of October, and then roughly December 10th, 15th through the end of the season, that deer spending 95% of his daylight hours, legal hunting hours, on his belly. If he's not laying on your farm, you're going to have a hard time killing him.
Yeah. If
he's laying on your farm, your odds go up exponentially of killing that deer.
So what do I need to do then? If I've got, let's start with just a 40 piece.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How with 40 acres, how much of that acreage do I need to be trying to turn into, in your opinion? What do I need to be, how much bedding on, let's say 40, what should I try to do with a 40?
As much as you can, and still be able to hunt it effectively, get in and out of it effectively. It doesn't do you a lot of good to set up a bedding area. And when I say set up a bedding area, in my opinion, there's absolutely nothing that beats switchgrass, warm season grasses, with some structure in the middle of it. So my favorite type to set up that we've had the most success with is like an old cow pasture.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you got an old pasture on a 40 or a 60 that you bought, and there's 8-acre hillside that was just always a pasture. It's got a few of them scrubby little trees in it,
right?
A little bit of structure in it, to go. And now it's all grown up in tall grass, just regular, any kind of grass, just native stuff briars, all that kind of stuff. And I hear all the time people say, "Well, deer bed on that hillside." I don't want to leave. I don't want to. And you're absolutely right. When I'm on the road, I sleep in a hotel. It doesn't mean that that's where I want to stay all the time,
Right.
but when I'm in the area, it's a safe place to lay my head. Right. What I want to do is make that a master suite. And so by taking some of that brush out, leaving some structure, leaving some big trees. If you don't have big trees, you can put in a few rows of miscanthus grass or something like that, but then put in switchgrass, put in warm season grasses. That's, in my opinion, and what I've seen, that is like a master suite. If an animal has the opportunity to bed in that, and it makes sense for him, for wind directions, for his entrance and exit routes, that's where he's going to stay.
And then leave it the hell alone.
Yes.
Don't
Stay out of it.
just stay away from it.
Yep. Stay out of it.
What if I want to? Can I go shed hunt it, or should I? I mean, when they say
I
bedding,
would. I mean, I would.
because a lot of people say no, you stay out of it. If you got a quote unquote sanctuary, stay away from it. Don't even go in there.
And if you're that hardcore, okay, but I bought the ground to enjoy it. I enjoy shed hunting. That's where the sheds are at. So I might spend 2 or 3 days in February. I have a hard time believing if I bump a buck out of there in March because I'm looking for his antlers, that I've ruined it for October the following year. Now come July, when he's setting up his summer patterns and he's setting up, if he's in there then, I'd try not to bump him. I don't gain anything by going in there then. And, I wouldn't go stomp it 2 weeks in a row, for 14 days straight or anything like that. But, at the end of the day, you're buying this farm to enjoy it. And so if going in there and walking that bedding area once or twice a year to find sheds in March, I'm sure there's research out there that'll say that buck now lives in Cumberland County, but I don't know that that's the case.
Are you good with trail cameras everywhere?
I try to keep them out of sanctuaries simply for the intrusion factor. Even cell cams, you got to go to them once in a while. I mean, every cell cam I've had, as good as they are, batteries die, they quit sending pictures, cards corrupt, squirrel chews on the antenna, whatever the case is, all of a sudden you quit getting. So I like to leave them 50, 75 yards off on trails going in and out, and in on food sources. So I do a lot of rope scrapes, hemp rope.
I just got into that.
I do a lot of that. That is and the kind of my experience, and this is solely my experience. It's not going to cause a deer to alter what he's doing, but if you have one on a known trail, on a common travel corridor, more often than not, they're going to stop and use it
and check it out.
Yeah. So it's a great inventory tool.
I told myself when I started this thing, I was going to ask everybody that came on here this same question just to get their opinion on it. Do you think that big bucks steer clear or notice trail cameras and are affected by them?
I absolutely think that's personality based.
On that deer?
100%.
Really?
So I will tell you a story. It was early adrenaline time frame. A good friend of mine, Eddie McFarland is his name, and he's got a grass waterway on his farm. And all summer long, there was 4 bucks coming out of the timber on the other side, walking down this grass waterway between 2 cornfields and going to a bean field to feed in the evenings. And I mean, it was like clockwork. Every evening he was getting pictures of these deer. Right. So this was before cell cams, but the very first time he got a picture of all 4 bucks, and the back deer was a Boone and Crockett class whitetail, world class whitetail. So that's the only picture he had of that deer. When he got that picture, that deer was stopped staring at the camera that was on a 4x4 post on his shoot house, right? And that's in this grass waterway. So the third deer in that line was still a 160-inch deer, and he was still coming through there every day. So Him and his partner go. They sit in that stand, and it was the first hunt in October when the wind was right. I don't remember if it was the actual first or the first week or whatever. First 3 deer come out. The 4th deer comes out. It's the 170-inch deer that he had a picture of the first night. That deer walks in that line. He then takes a right-hand turn before he gets his picture taken. He goes about 30 yards into the cornfield, and he walks past Eddie in the cornfield, 30 yards deep, and he comes back out of that cornfield. He avoided that trail camera by 30 to 40 yards. He comes back out into the grass waterway at 40 yards behind him, and that's where Eddie shot and killed him. He got his picture taken one time, and he avoided that camera every night after that.
And still use that same grass waterway.
Yep.
So you think it's
all on video,
and the other ones would walk right past
by it every night.
So you think it's within the deer's personality, whether it's just something he don't like or something.
Certainly. And you can see in pictures that you get, some bucks don't even pay attention to it. Other ones are staring right at it. And you can't tell me, I don't know if it's a noise when it sends that picture or when it, but I think it's personality based on each individual.
That's very, very interesting. I like that. Because me and my buddy that I hunt with, we have huge fights over it, over like, and he's said the same. He says he doesn't like, he doesn't mind we got him out there, but he says, I've watched with my binoculars. I've watched them come up, I'll turn her and go, just like you said, kind of go around them and then go back where they go, and he goes, them big bucks don't like him. And I'm like, oh, they don't care. But that's why I always like to ask everybody what they think about it.
I've chased bucks where it seemed like I could have hung a camera on Walmart's parking lot that year, and that buck would have walked by. I think it's very personality based.
That's interesting. I like that. Let me ask you this, coming towards the end of this thing, and I just thought of this today. I wanted to ask you this. As far as, first off, selling land to somebody that you've sold, what's the biggest deer somebody killed off a piece of ground you got that called you and said, Scotty, you ain't gonna believe this?
So it's funny you ask. I sold a piece in Macoupin County this fall. We closed on it in, I think, the second week of October. The first time that they went out to hunt it, the first night they went to hunt it, the guy's son went to the back. There was a 200-acre tract. The guy's son went to the back of the farm. He hunted for about 45 minutes and shot a 175-inch 10-pointer.
Wow.
So yeah, that's the biggest deer that I know of that anybody has shot off of. And it was just it was an exciting story. And so, we have, again, kind of like we were talking about earlier, we got a lot of ideas, a lot of things that we're going to do to that track, but it was just really cool to for that to work out that way.
Sure. Let me ask you this: have you ever had anybody buy a piece of property and like something crazy with it that had happened, or they had found something like and said, they bought this piece, was out stomping around it, and was like, called you and go, you ain't gonna believe what I found in here? Anything crazy that you could think of?
No, nothing.
Nothing too wild.
No, nothing. Nobody
found found a big mason jar filled of
fill of money.
Great grandpa Paul had been stored for 30 years out in the middle of the pasture.
No, I haven't had that. I've had I did have some guys find what we can only assume is an old homestead from years back, and we were up in the hill country and I think that farm was in Calhoun, but they called, and it was on a part of the farm that we didn't actually walk whenever they purchased it, and they sent me some pictures of it, and it was like for lack of a better term, it looked like it was like an old homestead where somebody had lived or maybe in the 1900s.
Wow.
Whatever,
that's pretty neat.
And it was cool. There wasn't much left of it. It was like a foundation and you could see parts of an old building, but there was enough of it there. You could tell that at one point somebody had lived there. So that was kind of neat.
That is neat. Let me ask you this. Last question for you as far as this goes. Scott Athmer's ideal piece of ground. Acreage, if you had to, let's not say you had unlimited resources, but your ideal piece, how it lays, what's it got on it. If you was to have enough money to buy what you would call my piece, this is, if I could do it, this is what I'd want. This is how I'd want it to lay. What would it be?
Something that produces a 200-inch whitetail every year, whether that's 40 or 400. Jeremy, that's what I want.
That's what you want.
No. So ideally, I would like to have whatever size it is, and I'm talking 40 and above.
Sure.
Whether we go to 40 or we go to 400, I would like to have a third of it in food.
Okay.
Another, maybe not quite a third, in some sort of bedding cover, preferably in a couple of different locations so that I can get around it, and depending on the prevailing winds and stuff like that, and the remainder in mature timber with a year-round water source, whether that's a creek. I don't prefer big rivers. I prefer creeks, drainage ditches, something like that keeps water 99% of the time, but is also not a big hindrance to get a whitetail across it.
Sure.
They don't have to swim to cross it. So that would be my ideal piece. And then it's really difficult to say how I would lay that out. I'm big into food plot architecture. So laying out food plots in such a manner that preferably a deer can't see past maybe 50 yards wherever he's feeding. It allows them to feel secure, in my opinion, and it makes your calling much more effective. If he can't see all the way to the other side, he's got to come check it out.
Gotcha.
If you're calling at a deer that's on the other side of a 160-acre cornfield and he can see all the way to you, he's got no reason to come over there if there's not a decoy out there. If you have your food plots set up and screens set up so that he can't see all the way to that tree line or whatever you may be sitting in, more often than not, curiosity is going to get the best of him, especially if it's November and he's cruising by himself. And he's either going to come straight over there or he's going to work himself downwind and show up in your area because he can't see that from where he's at. So food plot architecture is a huge deal for me if you have the room to do it.
I think we could sit here and do this for hours. You know what I'm saying? I think there's just so much stuff to cover. But if I got a piece of land, or I'm looking to buy a piece of land, Trophy Properties, I've done a ton of research looking for myself on there. If I want to get a hold of Scott Athmer, how am I going to do? If I want to work with you, how do I get a hold of you? What's my phone numbers? How am I doing this?
Yeah, call or text. Just call my cell phone, 618-830-6192, or text me. That's the absolute best way to get a hold of me. I do have a Facebook page. However, with phones being what they are, Messenger doesn't always work. Sometimes I end up getting them late or not at all or whatever. So if you've got questions, you want to talk deer, you want to talk land, give me a call. I'm always up for having these conversations, dude. I love it.
Scott, I appreciate your time. I know that with your two jobs, it keeps you stretched thin, and to give me an hour's worth of your time to talk shop like this, I appreciate it a lot.
I've enjoyed it.
I wish you the best with this and your second career and hobby that you say that you have, that you probably spend more time than you thought you ever was going to on. I appreciate it. I appreciate you coming on. I wish you the best of luck in selling and buying season here. And I appreciate your time, Scotty, for coming on. And
thanks for having me.
You betcha. So, folks, Scott Athmer, if you're looking to buy or sell something, get a hold of him. Great man. I've known him since high school. Very fair person. Will treat you right in either direction you're wanting to go. And we'll see you on the next one. Thanks again, Scotty. I appreciate it.
Thank you.